אנחנו מוצאים את הספור עם זרה שמשון?
האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה? מה? כן.
Good evening, everyone. Erev Tov and Dobra V'Yetcher. We're in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Behar. We're in Os Aleph, section number 1, and it is a very, very long and somewhat complicated piece. We're only going to be able to do about the first third, I would say. But in any case, we have to look at a couple of psukim before we begin. These two psukim are from the beginning of the Parsha, the beginning of Parsha Behar. Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe behar Sinai lemor, and Hashem spoke to Moshe on Har Sinai, saying, Daber al b'nei Yisrael, speak to b'nei Yisrael, ve'amarta aleihem, and say to them, Ki savo el haaretz, when you come into the land, Asher ani nosein lachem, that I am giving to you, v'shov sa haaretz shabos lashem, and the land should keep a sabbatical year to Hashem, and then the psukim go on to talk about the Shemitah year, all of the different laws of the Shemitah year of the 7th year, and how the agricultural products of that year have to be handled, and how the land has to be handled, and how loans and things like that have to be handled. So there's a lot of mitzvos and laws and details that the Torah goes on to discuss that all relate to the Shemitah year, and then it goes into the Yovel year as well, which was the 50th year in the cycle. Every 7 years of the cycle, there was a Shemitah year, and every 50 years, there was a Yovel year. After observing 7 Shemitah cycles, you had your Yovel year, your 50th year. Let's take a look at the Zera Shimshon's comments here. Pasuk, the Pasuk states, Vayedaber Hashem al Moshe b'Har Sinai lemor. That's the Pasuk we just read. Hashem spoke to Moshe on Har Sinai, saying, Pirish Rashi. Rashi on this Pasuk explains, Ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What is the connection of Shemitah to Har Sinai? V'halo kol ha-mitzvos nemru b'Sinai. And is it not true that all of the mitzvos were said on Har Sinai? In other words, on the simplest level, Rashi is asking the question, why did the Torah specifically go out of its way very much to mention Har Sinai here? I mean, we know that the episodes of the giving of the Torah on Har Sinai happened all the way back in Sefer Shmos and Parshas Yisro. So why here towards the end of Sefer Vayikra, after so many mitzvos and things have been discussed between those two places, does the Torah bring back Har Sinai and say Hashem spoke to Moshe on Har Sinai and taught the laws of Shemitah? So Rashi's saying, why would the Torah do that? All the mitzvos were taught on Har Sinai. So why specifically mention Har Sinai in reference to Shemitah, the laws of Shemitah here in our Parsha? Ela bad ma Shemitah ne'amru kloloseha ufratoseha v'diktu keha mi Sinai. What the Torah is trying to do is teach us that just like regarding the laws of Shemitah, where the Torah here states all of its general principles and its more detailed laws, and v'diktu keha and all of its specific details, and all of those, the Torah is telling us were given on Har Sinai. By mentioning Har Sinai here before the discussion about Shemitah, the Torah is telling us everything here, all of the laws of Shemitah, general principles, details, fine points, everything was taught on Har Sinai. So too, kol shar ha-mitzvos nemru, klolosehen ufratosehen v'diktu kehen mi Sinai. So too regarding all of the other mitzvos that are given in the Torah, where the Torah does not specifically say this mitzvah was given on Har Sinai, and this mitzvah was given on Har Sinai, and this mitzvah was given on Har Sinai. Nonetheless, all of the mitzvahs were given in comprehensive fashion with their general principles and their detailed laws and their fine points. All of that was given at Har Sinai. Kach shnuya b'Toras Kohanim. This is how, this is a teaching from the Medrash called Toras Kohanim. And so this is Rashi saying that's where this information comes from. Okay, so let's just pause here very quickly to say that the Zera Shimshon starts with a Rashi. It's a very well-known Rashi, and Rashi's question appears to be, why does the Torah mention Har Sinai in reference to Shemitah and single out Shemitah when all of the mitzvos were given on Har Sinai. So why mention Shemitah specifically here? Rashi answers, if you keep turning and looking through the psukim in our Parsha, you'll see a tremendous amount of detailed laws being taught about Har Sinai, about Shemitah, about the Shemitah year and all of its rules. And so you'll understand that just like Shemitah was given on Har Sinai with all of its laws and principles and fine points, so too all of the mitzvos were given at Har Sinai with all of the principles and details and fine points. Okay, good. Now the Zera Shimshon starts to ask his questions. He's going to pose 3 questions. Makshim ha'olam, the world asks, de'ibcha miboile. Rashi should have phrased his question in the opposite way, in the opposite order. And he should have said, Ma inyan Har Sinai eitzel Shemitah. Rashi should have said, why is there a mention of Har Sinai here regarding the laws of Shemitah? And the concept, the understanding behind Rashi's question on the simple level is that the subject matter here is Shemitah. So the question is, why is Har Sinai, which is just mentioned right in the first pasuk, being mentioned when the whole entire subject matter coming up after this is the laws of Shemitah, or the laws of Shemitah, as opposed to the way Rashi actually phrased his question, which was Ma inyan Shemitah eitzel Har Sinai. Why is Shemitah being mentioned in reference to Har Sinai? And the Zera Shimshon is saying that question doesn't seem to be the right way to ask the question, because we're not discussing Har Sinai. So it doesn't make sense to say, why is Shemitah being mentioned in a Torah portion that discusses Har Sinai? This Torah Parsha does not discuss Har Sinai. It discusses Shemitah. And so therefore the proper way to ask the question is, why does the Torah in this Parsha, in the first pasuk, mention Har Sinai in relation to a whole discussion about Shemitah? That's the way the question should be asked, according to the Zera Shimshon and many of the commentators. Ve'od, and another question, Mahu, what does it mean? Shechazar lomar, that Rashi went back after posing the question. He then repeated and went back and said, V'halo, kol mitzvos nemru misinai. Weren't all of the mitzvos stated at Har Sinai? Shenira shehem shtei kushios, which makes it appear that Rashi's actually asking 2 questions. When we learned the quote from Rashi in the first paragraph, it looked like Rashi was only asking 1 question. And the point about all of the mitzvos being said on Har Sinai was the amplification or the explanation of the question. Why did the Torah mention Har Sinai in reference to Shemitah when all of the mitzvos were given on Har Sinai? So why single out Har Sinai? That's the way we learn the Rashi when we saw it in the first paragraph. But the Zera Shimshon says that if you look at the language of Rashi carefully, it almost appears like he is asking his question about the connection between Shemitah and Har Sinai, and then he's asking a second question about all of the mitzvos being given on Har Sinai. Why would Rashi make it seem like he's asking 2 questions when apparently the way people generally learn the Rashi, there's only 1 question? So that is question 2. Umilvad mashehir b'lahakshos haraim, in addition to all of the questions that Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, Rabbeinu Eliyahu Mizrahi, known as the Mizrahi, a commentary on Rashi, in addition to all the questions he asks, Od Hikshu Hamaforshim, the commentators also ask another question. Loma Gila Hakavod Dovar Ze B'Shmita. Why did Hashem reveal this idea of things being taught on Har Sinai in reference to Shemitah Yoser Mishar HaMitzvos, more than other mitzvos? Shegam im mitzvah acheres lo hayusa nishnes ba'arvos Moab. Because also any other mitzvah which was not repeated on the plains of Moab when the Jews were poised to go into the land of Israel, and we'll get back to that point in a moment, Vayomer bo Bahar Sinai, and if the Torah used the phrase Bahar Sinai in reference to one of those mitzvos, Lamadnu hadovar ba'atzmo, we would have learned the same thing that we're learning here when the Torah uses the words Bahar Sinai in reference to Shemitah. So let's understand what's being talked about here, and to see this inside you would need to look at the Rashi and see that Rashi discusses this exact issue of Arvos Moab. So let's explain. The Jews, of course, received the Torah at Har Sinai and the Aseres HaDibros and many other mitzvos were given at that time. In addition to that, in Sefer Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu repeats and talks about all of the mitzvos, sorry, not all, but many, many, many mitzvos that were given to Bnei Yisrael. Moshe describes them and discusses them when the Jews were on the Arvos Moab, the plains of Moab, poised to enter the land of Israel. That's when Sefer Devarim and all those mitzvos and explanations and narratives that Moshe discusses and shares with the Jewish people, that's where they take place on the Arvos Moab. Some mitzvos are mentioned in reference to Har Sinai, and our other episodes are connected to other episodes that happened while the Jews are traveling in the Midbar. And some mitzvos are mentioned at Arvos Moab and Sefer Devarim, and they're not all mentioned in both places. So the issue is that the question here, the question number 3 in the Zera Shimshon is that he's bringing from these other Meforshim. The question is, the Torah could have chosen any mitzvah that was not given or not repeated at Arvos Moab and in the plains of Moab when the Jews were poised to enter into Eretz Yisrael, and the Torah could have mentioned Har Sinai in reference to that mitzvah, and we would have been able to learn the same thing we're learning now, that the Torah used the words Har Sinai in connection to Shemitah. Why? For the following reason. If a mitzvah wasn't repeated at Arvos Moab by Moshe Rabbeinu, then we can deduce, obviously, it must have been given at Har Sinai. So therefore, when the Torah mentions the words Har Sinai in connection to a mitzvah that wasn't repeated on the Arvos Moab, we have the ability to say, oh, we know it was given at Har Sinai. So why did the Torah go out of its way to mention the words Har Sinai in connection to this? In order to teach that exactly what we're learning here, that just like this mitzvah was given with its laws and its details at Har Sinai, so too all of the mitzvahs were given with the laws and the details. In other words, we still have a problem of why did Hashem use the words Har Sinai in connection to the laws of Shemitah when he could have used, the Torah could have used the words Har Sinai in reference to many other mitzvos, and we would have been able to learn the same thing. So that's question 3. It's basically a way of saying to Rashi, you seem to have asked a question, but you don't seem to have really fully answered it. What's going to happen now is that the Zera Shimshon is going to give us his completely new and novel approach to understanding Rashi. And by explaining Rashi in this entirely new way, he'll show us how he's answering his 3 questions. So please be prepared to keep in your mind the simple, basic way we learned Rashi in the first paragraph, and now this new way that the Zera Shimshon is going to explain the Rashi. Yesh lomar, and we can say she'in hachinami. It's true. Shahaher geshu, that the question is here. The Zera Shimshon is using the word hergesh, which means feeling, in a way that the best way to translate it is question, meaning the feeling of a problem or the feeling of a question. So inachinami shahaher geshu. We should concede that the question is ma inyan Har Sinai etzel Shemitah. What's the connection of Har Sinai to the laws of Shemitah? Klomar, which means to say, Loma gila hakosav davar zeh b'Shmitah dafka. Zera Shimshon says what Rashi is really asking is not what's the connection that the Torah is mentioning Har Sinai here. What Rashi is really asking is why specifically in reference to Shemitah as opposed to other mitzvos did the Torah mention Har Sinai? It's a deeper question. Not just why is it mentioned here, but why is it mentioned regarding a Shemitah when it could have been mentioned regarding other mitzvos? Why specifically connect Har Sinai to Shemitah? Kikushas hamaforshim hanizkarim la'el, which is exactly the question that some of the commentators that were mentioned above asked. Omnam, however, ha'emesu, the truth is, shegam im hayakosfo b'mitzvah acheres. The truth is, wherever, even if the Torah had written the words Har Sinai regarding a different mitzvah, we would have asked the same question. Whichever mitzvah the Torah would have chosen to put out the words Har Sinai, we would have asked, why here? Why are you mentioning Har Sinai here as opposed to some other mitzvah where you could have mentioned Har Sinai? Because of this, Ein lahakshos od ma inyan Har Sinai etzel shmita. Because of that fact, it doesn't make sense to ask the question, what is the connection between Har Sinai and Shemitah? Because wherever it was put, we would have asked the same question. Elamahu, but rather the real question is, what is it, Shedafka b'Shmitah, that specifically regarding Shemitah, what is it about Shemitah that specifically Gila Hakos of Zeh, the Torah revealed to us this mention of Har Sinai. V'hainu mamish hahergesh, and this is exactly the question how Rashi phrased it, ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. What is the relevance of mentioning Shemitah in reference to Har Sinai? So the Zera Shimshon is just answered his first question, which was, why did Rashi seemingly use an imprecise and kind of backward language in his question? And Zera Shimshon says, because Rashi wasn't asking the question you thought he was asking. Rashi was asking a deeper question, which isn't, why did the Torah say Shemitah here? Why did the Torah mention Har Sinai here when it could have been mentioned in regard to a different mitzvah? The question is, what is it on a deeper level about Shemitah that compelled the Torah to mention Har Sinai here? What is the hidden connection between Har Sinai and Shemitah that engendered this mention of Har Sinai here in reference to Shemitah? And the way Rashi phrased the question fits with that question perfectly. The ode, and then the ode Hosif, and then Rashi continued, V'halo kol ha-mitzvos, and he said, weren't all the mitzvos given at Har Sinai? Klomar, which means to say, the Zera Shimshon is now going to give a novel interpretation to what those words in Rashi means. Klomar, this actually means to say, V'yoser tov haya, it would have been better, continuing with the second column, likach mitzvah cheres, to take a different mitzvah, me'osan shehayu nohago sham bamidbar, from those mitzvos which applied in the midbar, uba Har Sinai, and at the time of the giving the Torah on Har Sinai, v'lo hashmita, and not to mention the mitzvah of Shemitah, she'ena noheges beHar Sinai, that did not become applicable at the time of the giving the Torah at Har Sinai klal at all, ela ba'aretz dafka, but rather specifically and only once the Jewish people entered in to the land of Israel. So the Zera Shimshon says, just like we need to look at Rashi's first question in a deeper way and realize that it's probing into what is the hidden, deeper connection between Shemitah and Har Sinai. The second question in Rashi, and it is a second question according to Zera Shimshon, is why did the Torah not connect the words Har Sinai to a mitzvah which applied at the time of Har Sinai, or applied at a time subsequent to Har Sinai, but before the Jews were poised to enter Eretz Yisrael and standing on Arvos Moab? That would have been more appropriate because those mitzvahs actually applied at the time. However, the Torah chose the mitzvah of Shemitah, which didn't apply at all during any time in the Torah as an entire corpus. In other words, Shemitah did not take effect until after the Torah was completed and the Jews entered Eretz Yisrael, which is described in Sefer Yoshua, not in the Torah itself. So why use Shemitah, which was only going to apply and come into effect much later in the future, here to connect it to Har Sinai? That's the second question. The Tirates and Rashi answered, Ma Shemitah nemru klaloseha. Just like Shemitah, just like regarding Shemitah, its general principles and details and fine points were all mentioned. Klomar, so that means to say, shahaklolos vehapratim vahadikdukim shel hashmita. What Rashi actually means to say is, again, this is a totally novel understanding of Rashi. What Rashi actually means to say with his answer is that the general principles and the details and the fine points of Shemitah heim dome bidome They are similar leklolos upratim v'dikdukim shel Har Sinai, to the general principles and the details and the fine points of Har Sinai itself, masha ein kein shar hamitzvos, which does not apply to all of the other mitzvos. So Rashi, according to the Zera Shimshon, is saying that the reason the Torah used the words Har Sinai in reference to Shemitah, as opposed to using the words Har Sinai in reference to other mitzvos, is because there is a hidden connection in terms of the principles and details and fine points that apply to Shemitah, connection between those things and the general principles and fine points and details that apply to Har Sinai. It's safe to say that there's no average or normal reader who reads that Rashi and sees any of this that the Zera Shimshon is explaining to us and sharing with us when they read the Rashi. Obviously, this is understanding the Rashi on a much deeper level. What's going to happen now is the Zera Shimshon is going to go into the connection for the first word, the klolo seha, the general principles. He's going to give an example of a general principle that applies to Shemitah and only applies to Har Sinai, so that he can begin to illustrate for us what he means by this secret hidden connection between Har Sinai and Shemitah. V'zeh bi'uram, and this is the explanation. Hinei kishenedaktek b'tam hashmita. When we investigate the understanding behind the laws of Shemitah, lama hi b'shana hashvi'is dafka. Why are the laws applicable only in the seventh year? Why is Shemitah only apply in the seventh year of the cycle? Hu davar ne'elam v'nistar mineged einenu. This is something which is hidden and concealed from our eyes. Ubiprat lefi pshutan shel dvarim. And this is certainly true when you're looking at the laws of Shemitah and the concept of Shemitah in a simple, straightforward way. When you just read the psukim in the Torah, you have no idea why Shemitah only happens in the seventh year of the cycle. And even though the commentators delve deeply into this matter and expand the discussion and give many hints about Shemitah and understanding it, nonetheless, they still don't give any sufficient explanation as to why Shemitah is only observed in the seventh year of the cycle. Why not the sixth year, every sixth year, every ninth year, every 10th year would make sense, would make more sense from a certain perspective in terms of the number 10. Now, the Zera Shimshon brings down a piece in the Medrash Rabbah that specifically deals with this issue of 7. The Isa b'Medrash Rabbah Parshas Emor, it states in the Medrash Rabbah on Parshas Emor, quoting a pasuk there, B'chodesh Hashvi, in the 7th month, Be'echad lachodesh, on the 1st of the month. That pasuk, of course, is referring to Rosh Hashanah. So the Medrash Rabbah says, comments, Kol Hashvin Chavivin La'olam. All sevenths, every seventh thing in a cycle, or every seventh thing in a list or an order, is special la'olam. It's always special to Hashem. Lamala, above, meaning in the 7 heavens. The Chazal teach us that there are 7 heavens. Hashvi chaviv, the 7th one, is the most special. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, Solu leroche va'aravos. Praise the one who rides on Aravos, and the name of the 7th heaven is Aravos, and that is connected specifically to Hashem in that pasuk in Tehillim. So we see that it's a very special, it is the most beloved level of heaven to Hashem. Ba'aratzos, in the lands of the world, and all the lands of the world, it divided into 7 climactic areas. Hashvi Chaviva, the 7th one, which includes Eretz Yisrael, is the most special to Hashem. V'chule. B'doros, when we talk about the generations from Adam and continuing past Adam, Hashvi Chaviv, the 7th generation is special to Hashem. That was Chanoch, and if we look back, we see how there's special words mentioned about how close Chanoch was to Hashem and how he walked in the ways of Hashem. So Chanoch, the 7th from Adam Arishon, is special. The Avos, when it comes to the Avos, our forefathers, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh is beloved. Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Levi, Kahos, Amram, and Moshe. Moshe is the seventh in that list, and he's so special. The Chsiv, it's written by Moshe, something that it doesn't say regarding anyone, any other human being. Moshe Allah El Elokim, and Moshe went up to Hashem. Babonim, when it talks about the sons of Yishai, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh one is the most beloved. David hu Hashvi, David was the seventh son of Yishai. Bamalachim, when we look at our list of Jewish kings, starting with Shaul, the seventh one, who was Asa. We look at King Asa, we see that it talks about how he was followed in the ways of David, his forefather, and how he followed in the ways of Hashem and was such a righteous king. Bashanim, when we talk about the years, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh is beloved. Dichsiv Hashvi is Tishmatena Uvinatashta, and the seventh year you will let the land lie fallow and you will not harvest the crops. So that's the Shemitah year. So the seventh year is again special. By Shemitah, even when we talk about the Shemitah cycles, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh cycle, the seventh Shemitah in the cycle is special because it's the year before Yovel. And we have the combination of the seventh Shemitah year, the 49th year, following right into followed immediately by the Yovel year, the 50th year. By Yomim, when it comes to the days of the week, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh day is beloved. Shneimar Vayavarach Elokim es Yom Hashvi. The Hashem blessed the seventh day, which is Shabbos, Bechadashim, in the months, Hashvi Chaviv, the seventh month is special. And the months, the Torah starts with Nisan, so the seventh month is Tishrei, and Tishrei, of course, has the mitzvos of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, and so many special mitzvos in that month. So this piece that the Zera Shimshon quotes at length talks about this, the seven being a special beloved number by Hashem. V'hikshesham, we're continuing now on the next page. V'hikshesham Hayofet Toar, and the Yofet Toar asks on that Medrash Rabbah that we just looked at, Ma mala hizu l'shviyos. What is the specialness of these seven things that we just mentioned? Are these things that are seven in their cycle? If Moshe, let's say, was not the seventh in line from Abraham, would he not have been extraordinarily special and beloved to Hashem? And if the Arabos, the seventh level of the heavens, if it was not the seventh one, would it not have been more beloved than the other different levels of heaven? And so too all the rest. So the Yofet Toar says it is the unique individual qualities of each thing mentioned in that list that made it to beloved to Hashem, not the fact that it was seventh in the cycle. Even if it wasn't seventh in its particular list, it would have been special to Hashem. Each one of those things, David would have been special to Hashem, for example, if he was the sixth son or the seventh son or some totally different number son. And so too with each of them, the Yofet Toar says it was that individual, again, that individual's unique qualities are that item, that phenomenon's unique qualities that makes it chaviv to Hashem, beloved to Hashem, not the fact apparently that it happened to be seven and a cycle. We're going to skip the next paragraph, and I'm going to tell you what the Yofet Toar, how the Yofet Toar answers this question, but just for time purposes, I'm going to skip the next paragraph. In the next paragraph, the Zera Shimshon brings the Yofet Toar's answer, which is very important to understand, and it is as follows: that Hashem, if the number seven was not special to Hashem, then Hashem would not have gone out of his way, so to speak, to make sure that all of these different people and items and phenomenon were seven in the cycle. He didn't have to make Moshe seven in the seventh in the line of the Avos. He didn't have to make Hanoch seven in the line from Adam HaRishon. He didn't have to make the Aravos the seventh heaven. He could have made it the sixth heaven or the eighth heaven or the ninth heaven, etc. He didn't have to make David the seventh son of Yishai, and so too with all, he didn't have to make Tishrei the seventh month after Nisan, and so too with all of the items on the list in the Medrash Rabbah. The Yofet Toar says the point of the Medrash Rabbah is, yes, Absolutely, it's the unique qualities and characteristics of each of these things or each of these items that are listed. However, the point that's being made is Hashem, because of the specialness of the number 7 in each of these things, chose to make sure that the special person or special phenomenon was the 7th one. And an example that he gives is Shabbos. Hashem could have given us a 5-day week and rested on the 6th day, and the 6th day would have been Shabbos. Hashem could have made a 7-day work week, and the 8th day could have been Shabbos when he rested. But Hashem chose to make 6 days of create Brias Olam in 6 days, rest on the 7th, and imbue the 7th day with all of the specialness and holiness of Shabbos. And that shows us that Hashem has a special love, a special appreciation, so to speak, for things that are 7 in the cycle in the list. And now let's continue right after that. Umikan nira, and from here it would appear shahamala shel shana hashmita hamagia, and it would appear that the specialness of the 7th year that comes to it behiyosa shvis, because it's the 7th year, shekol hashvin chavivin, because all 7 things in a cycle are special. Nelamimenu, that is still hidden from us. Lama dafka hukach, why is it specifically that? In other words, with everything we've said so far, and the Medrash Rabbah and the Yofet Torah's question and his answer, we still don't understand the fundamental reason why the 7th year, our 7th person in a line, or 7th day, our 7th month, why 7 is special to Hashem. We still don't know the answer. That secret is still concealed from us. All we know is that this was Hashem's will at the time that he created the world, to create the world in 6 days, and again make the 7th day, the day of Shabbos, special and holy and unique. And so too, in a similar way to Shemitah and why it's the 7th year, so too it is completely hidden from us the reason why Hashem put his Shechina on Har Sinai velo al Har Acher, and not on any other mountain. And if you say the reason is that Har Sinai was lower than the other mountains, Kedichsiv, as a pasuk in Tehillim says, Loma tiratztun harim gavnunim. Why do you prance around, you tall, majestic mountains? And the point of that pasuk is, you're so proud, you tall mountains, but Hashem didn't choose you to give the Torah. Hashem chose a low mountain, Har Sinai. Mikol Makom, nevertheless, kosher. There's still a problem. Lomalo osa har acher nomuch. Why did Hashem choose to make specifically Har Sinai the lowest mountain in the region and give the Torah there? Why not choose a different mountain and make that mountain the lowest mountain and give the Torah there? Mikol Makom kosher. Lomalo osar har. I'm sorry, that's what we just read. Veloma dafka hayazeh. So why was it specifically Har Sinai? So we begin to see a light is now beginning to shine for us, that the Zera Shimshon is telling us this hidden connection between Shemitah and Har Sinai. The Torah has concealed for us the reason why the Shemitah year gets the special laws. The 7th year gets the special laws of Shemitah because it's the 7th year in the cycle. But the reason why is hidden, just like the reason why Hashem chose Har Sinai to give the Torah, to make it a low mountain where Hashem would give the Torah, is also hidden from us. Continuing in the next column. And even from the reason that is stated in Medrash Bereshis Rabbah, al pasuk. On the pasuk, this pasuk comes, by the way, from the brachos that Yaakov Avinu gave to his sons at the end of Sefer Bereshis. This comes from the bracha to Yosef, these words. Birchos avicha gavru, the blessings of your father surpassed or were stronger. And that's just the quote from the pasuk. Here's the comment from the Bereshis Rabbah that the Zera Shimshon wants to teach us. Shebochar HaKadosh Baruch Hu beHar Sinai, Hashem chose Har Sinai lefisha al kol haharim avdu avodah zara, because on all the other mountains idol worship took place. Va'al har hazeh, but on this mountain of Har Sinai lo avdu shum avodah zara, idolatry never took place. No idols were ever worshipped on Har Sinai. So the Zera Shimshon says, wait a minute, maybe from this source of Bereshis Rabbah, we finally do have the answer why it's Har Sinai specifically that Hashem gave the Torah. And the answer is because idolatry never occurred there. Idols were worshipped on all the other mountains. Hainu hach. But that reason leads us to the same point. Shehem lo hoyu ovdim avodah zora ela al harim haramim. And that is that they only used to set up idols and worship them on the tall mountains. V'zeh hayenamuch. And Har Sinai, as we said, was a low mountain. And so the question comes back into place. Why did Hashem make Har Sinai dafka, specifically the low mountain, and then give the Torah there? Ve'od shemitchilas brias ha'olam huchan har zeh lematan Torah. Now the Zera Shimshon says, in addition to that, you need to know from Chazal, we learn that from the beginning of the Bria, Har Sinai was chosen to be the mountain. And that was at a time when no mountains had any idols, no idols existed, and no idols were worshipped on any mountains. Nonetheless, from the beginning of Bria Sa'olam, Hashem designated Har Sinai to be the place of the giving of the Torah. Huchan Har Zeh Lematan Torah, this mountain of Har Sinai was dedicated to give for the giving of the Torah, lahashras Shechina, and for the setting of the Shechina. Kemosha Amru, as it says in the Zohar, Muchanim hayu zeh im zeh mishesh yishmei bereshis. Har Sinai and Moshe Rabbeinu were already prepared for each other from the 6 days of creation. V'oso yom sheba Moshe el har Elokim, and on the day that Moshe came to Har Sinai, the Har of Hashem, nisrage shahar, the mountain became excited, so to speak, lumul Moshe, towards Moshe. The mountain wanted to move towards Moshe. V'hoyu smechim zeh im zeh, and they rejoiced over each other. Moshe and Har Sinai rejoiced to be reunited, to see each other, and to begin to prepare for the Matan Torah. So you, Ad Kan Lashono, until here's a quote. So the Zera Shimshon says, you can see that even though you might think there are reasons given why Hashem chose Har Sinai, underlying all of those statements, you'll come to a secret, to a mystery that we don't have the answer for. And if so, then we see that the general idea of Shemitah, that it should take place in the 7th year, hu domeh Har Sinai. This is similar to Har Sinai, shehishra sham shchinaso, that Hashem caused his Shechina to be present there, ve'enonu yodim lama, and we do not know why Hashem chose specifically the mountain of Har Sinai from the creation of the world to be this place. Hayu davka hashvi and chavivin. We don't know why 7s in these cycles are precious, and we don't know why Har Sinai was specifically prepared lahashras Shechina, to have the Shechina dwell there, ulios namuch mikol haharim, and to be lower than all of the other mountains. As you can see, the next paragraph, which we're going to stop here, but the next paragraph starts about upratoseha. Since the Zera Shimshon explained how the klal, the general principle, there's in a general way, a connection, a similarity between Har Sinai and Shemitah, he now goes on to talk about details of Shemitah that make it similar to details that have to do with Har Sinai. And then later on, he talks about dikdukeha, fine points that have to do with Shemitah that are connected and related, can be connected and related to Har Sinai. So as we have seen in the past, the Zera Shimshon sometimes graces us with an entirely radically new approach to understand Psukim, and we're able to look back and say we never would have seen that in the Psukim, and the Zera Shimshon, using Makoros and sources in his own brilliance, enlightens us. So to here, it's certainly a prime example of that exact same phenomenon. Yasher Koch to everyone for joining in learning of Zera Shimshon tonight. We look forward, God willing, to learning Zera Shimshon again next week.